Welcome to the history of one of my favourite bands of all time, the mighty Opeth. Now, who or what is an Opeth? The name Opeth comes from a Wilbur Smith novel called The Sunbird, where Opeth is the city of the moon. Very apt for a band with songs such as Under a Weeping Moon, Moon Above Sun Below, and Moonlapse Vertigo. Some would say they have a moon fetish. The band play a perfect blend of progressive death metal in the early years, and from Heritage onwards, have shifted to a more progressive rock-leaning sound. Both eras of the band offer a unique and challenging listening experience, which is sure to make you come back for more and more, over and over again until you burst. Now let's take a trip back to the formation of the band, way back in 1989. The band was formed by lead vocalist David Isberg after his departure from Procreation. David wanted to start a new band with a darker sound that was able to create its own sound that stood out from the pack. After gallivanting in Thailand and creating the band name, he returned to Stockholm, Sweden and met with Richard Nilsson, Dan and Mikkel, not Åkerfeldt, who formed the first incarnation of Opeth. 1990. This lineup would be short-lived, however, as David decided to bring an uninvited bassist to rehearsals. This bassist was none other than God himself, Lars Mikkel Åkerfeldt, who recently split from his band Eruption. Now this caused a divide within the band, as other band members had already found a bassist, so an argument broke out, and in the aftermath, only David and Mikkel were left, and thus Opeth became a two-piece. Now prepare your Fs in the chat, boys, because we're about to lose a lot of members. Soon after, they recruited drummer Anders Nordgren, bassist Nick Doring, and guitarist Andreas Demio, but Doring and Demio left the band after the first performance. They were replaced by guitarist Kim Peterson and bassist Johan de Farfella. After the next show, de Farfella left Opeth to spend time with his girlfriend in Germany, and Kim Peterson left soon after, with the role of the bassist falling to Stefan Guteklint, and Peter Lindgren took on the role of the guitar. The following year, founding member David Isberg left the band citing creative differences. They're dropping like flies! The next to go would be bassist Stefan after the band signed to Candlelight Records in 1994. During this time, the band had begun to experiment with their sound, adding in more acoustic passages and melodies into the music rather than just bash your head against the wall death metal. And in 1995, they added session bassist De Farfalla back and released their debut, Orchid. Orchid, a highly underrated album in the catalogue in my opinion, which mixes the eerie cold atmosphere of a black metal record with beautiful acoustic passages, amazing solos and a raw sound unlike any other. Under the Weeping Moon and Forest of October being standouts for me, Mikkel sounds his most aggressive on here, with high shrieks that pierce the soul, pure majesty. It is worth noting that this album was produced by the mighty Dan Swano back in 1994, but was only released in 95 due to distribution problems. Now, when we go through each album, I want you guys at home to pick your favourite song off each one and let us know down below. For me, personally, from Orchid, it has to be Under the Weeping Moon. After a couple of live gigs, it was time to start writing again, and in 1996 they released a masterpiece called Morningrise. Morningrise, my second favourite album from the band. It took everything from Orchid and improved it in every single way. It still retains that almost black metal-like atmosphere, but ups the prog and emotion with cuts like The Night in the Silent Water and To Bid You Farewell, which always pull on my heartstrings. Then you have heavy cuts like Advent and Nectar, and let's not forget, the best Opeth song of all time, come on. The 20-minute magnum opus, Black Rose Immortal. Of course, that's my favourite song on the album. Why wouldn't it be? I'm Questy, I love my long songs. Opeth would go on to tour Scandinavia with Cradle of Filth, who I also love, so let me know if you want a history of them as well. While on tour, they attracted Century Media's attention, who signed the band releasing their albums in the States. Jump to 1997 and we would lose 2 more members, those being Difafala, who was kicked out, and Nordin, who left after hearing Difafala was kicked out without consulting him. Naughty boys. In walks 2 members you may know, Martin Lopez and Martin Mendez, who responded to an ad made by Mikel, and now with a full band again, we can dive into album number 3, produced by Fredrik Nordstrom, My Arms, Your Hearse. This is the album that marked their shift from a more atmospheric, experimental band to a fully formed progressive death metal powerhouse. The shrieks have been replaced by death growls, the production has become thick with dread, the songs, albeit a bit shorter, pack more of a punch, and it is the transitional album that would pave the way for their stardom on the next 2 albums. But don't pass up on this one just because it's transitional though. A lot of people have this as the favourite for good reason as well. The 1-2 punch of April Ethereal and When, oh, perfect, the moody Credence, and the sheer brutality of Demon of the Fall, but my favourite is actually the underrated Karma, where the end section will just break your neck. Opeth then signed with Peaceville Records, and my favourite album ever was created. That's right, it's time for Still Life. This album has everything, from a compelling concept about banishment, love and consequences, to the jump scare intro of The More. I mean, come on, how can you not instantly love this album when it starts out by making you feel your britches? The sound design is perfect, every death growl sends shivers down your spine, every guitar string pluck sounds meaningful, it's the whole package. I could mention standout songs, but that would be the whole album, so my favourite overall would just have to be The Face of Melinda due to the build-up and the riff in the middle. I could gush about this album all day, but it's time to move over because the sun sets over Blackwater Park. Blackwater Park, the gold standard album, produced by none other than Steven Wilson himself, of Porcupine Tree fame, who would also guest spot in the song Bleak, one of my personal favourites. This album made Opeth famous, come on. And rightfully so, it was just as polished and musically challenging as Still Life, with the whole album being a blast to sit through from start to finish. You have beautiful acoustic ballads like Harvest, complex juggernauts like The Drapery Falls and Bleak, and my personal favourite, the title track Blackwater Park. After the album, Opeth would go on to embark on their first world tour and would start writing material for the follow-ups Deliverance and Damnation. But first up, let's get the heavy one out the way, Deliverance. Mikel wanted to create an album as heavy as ever, which I think they accomplished with Deliverance, but he also had a lot of leftover softer tracks what he didn't want to waste. Longtime friend and my favourite vocalist of all time, Jonas Renske, persuaded Mikel to make a double album, one light, one heavy, which was a brilliant idea, so that's exactly what he did. Now, Deliverance is my favourite of the two, as it sounds like a continuation from Blackwater Park, just, a lot heavier. The song Master's Apprentices and Reef especially, oh my god, insanely heavy. It wasn't all ear-shattering though, as the album features the track Third Judgment, which is a lot more mellow and helps break up the album. My personal favourite though, it's Deliverance, it's the title track, it's a live staple, and it's glorious. Moving on to Damnation though, this was the yin to Deliverance's yang, the most mellow album they've ever done, and yes, that includes the new ones too. If you ever wanted to relax, play this bad boy, and you'll be sipping pina coladas on a beach in your mind in no time. A lot of great and moving songs on here like Hope Leaves, In My Time of Need, but the standout is the album opener, Window Pane. Ooh, that guitar gets me every time. Damnation also nabbed Opeth the Grammy for Best Hard Rock Performance. Now, after a 200-show tour between 2003 and 2004, the band returned home to write their next masterpiece, which is another fan favourite, and during this time they signed on to Roadrunner Records and keyboardist Weiberg joined as a full-time member, and Ghost Reveries was released in 2005 to critical acclaim. I first heard Ghost of Perdition playing in Saints Row 2, a great game. But anyway, this album is amazing, from the kiss-like waltz of Beneath the Mire, to the frantic hunt of Harlequin Forest, to the hauntingly evil Grand Conjuration. This album just about has it all. No wonder it's a fan favourite. My favourite overall though has to be Harlequin Forest. It really does feel like I'm being chased through the woods by some unknown entity. It isn't all smiles, however, as both Martin Lopez and Peter Lindgren both part ways shortly after, being replaced by Martin Axelrod and Fredrik Åkesson respectively. But now it's time to say goodbye to the heavy side of Opeth with the last album with death growls, that is, Watershed. I see roots beneath my feet, led me through wastelands of deceit. Rest your head now, don't you cry. Don't ever ask the reason why. The album that actually introduced me into the band, so it holds a place in my heart. I love Porcelain Heart and Burden especially, with the guitar getting more and more out of tune as the end approaches. This album is just as ferocious as Ghost Reveries in parts though, with songs like Heir Apparent and The Lotus Eater, the latter being my favourite from the album with that sexy humming. Alright, I'll stop doing that now. It never gets old. This album marks a shift into more prog rock sound of the band, with hints of it scattered throughout, which many fans detested, but a lot more who had an open mind embraced the change and enjoyed the follow-up, Heritage. Very different. Very, very different from anything they've ever done before. This was mellow, but not in a Damnation sense, more in a King Crimson or Jethro Tull sense. It was a big leap for the band, both artistically and sonically. Mikkel didn't want to rehash the same old ideas as before, and scrapped a couple of songs which sounded too much like the old Opeth. This change in sound is what the band wanted to do, and it made them happy, so I for one enjoy this shift. I actually saw them on the Heritage tour, and they played the song Folklore, and it was so surreal, I loved every second of it, so that is my pick for the best song on Heritage, Folklore. During this time, they parted ways with Per Weinberg and hired Joachim Svalberg to take over. Jump forward to 2014, and they would release my favourite album from the new era, entitled Pale Communion. Pale Communion is a lot more focused album than Heritage was. It's a lot less jazzy and experimental, but it's more just, classic prog rock. Songs like Cusp of Eternity, River, and Eternal Rains Will Come are all fantastic. And my favourite from the record, the 10-minute epic Moon Above, Sun Below. That's right, long songs are back, baby. This album flows very well and continues the band on the current prog rock trajectory. Nuclear Blast would soon sign the band, and a much heavier and more experimental album, Sorceress, would be unleashed. You're a sorceress, dun, 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 dun. The title track for Sorceress has been stuck in my head ever since it was released. Now, although this is a heavier and darker album in tone than the previous two, there's still no growls. The album was the first project under Motorbolga Records, a joint venture between Opeth and Nuclear Blast, and I've definitely said that wrong. Now, although this is my least favourite album of the band's, mainly due to mixing and the overall sound design, the songs, however, are still great, like the aforementioned title track and the amazing Era. But this would not be the end of an era for the band, as we have a final album to tackle in Cauda Venenum. Now this album is a return to the style found on Pale Communion, a more prog rock focused affair but with a twist. The band made the album both in English and in Swedish, which is a genius idea, as it would get people who could, have passed off the Swedish version to check out the album in the English version, and people to get out of the comfort zone and enjoy the album the way it was meant to be in Swedish. Or if you're like me, listen to them both, because more Opeth is never bad. So many fantastic songs, it's actually hard to choose one, but I'd have to go with Lovelorn Crime as the moody, beautiful song as my favourite. And now we come to the year 2021, last year, when Martin Axelrod left the band due to a conflict of interest, which leads us to today. Will Opeth release another album? Possibly. Will they go back to the roots? Who knows? Will it be great? You bet your sweet ass it will. So thank you for joining me into this dive into the history of Opeth. Let me know your favourite songs and albums down below, and what band you would like to see next.